Hello, CCCH families. It's Pastor Dan here, and I am excited for this month's online parenting class. Each month, as part of our online parenting time together, we like to spend just a few moments with you. A lot of times, we're in our family room together, my wife and I, sharing from our family room to your family room. In the last couple months, we've changed it up. Last month for May, Melissa shared with just our moms for Mother's Day, and she shared some of her wisdom, her joy, and also just some of her ideas from God's Word about being a mom. This month, since it's Father's Day month, I wanted to spend some time talking to my dads. One dad to another. Moms, you're welcome to listen into what we're talking about today. But I want to spend some time just talking about one simple passage and a few key thoughts for us. Whether you are a preschool dad, an elementary dad, or a teen dad like myself, these words from the book of Proverbs are so powerful and so helpful. If you don't know this yet, maybe you have just getting to know me. I have a 13-year-old son and a 16-year-old daughter. And as a dad, I love being able to spend time with them, but I also love having those moments of discipleship. And so often we kind of are wary of what that means. We're also very wary of another word that's connected to discipleship, which is discipline. We need to be aware that we as dads have the opportunity to raise up children who are disciples of Christ because we're willing to spend time showing them the right way to live life. And that's why I think Proverbs is very important for us. You have David, the father, passing on his wisdom to his son Solomon. Solomon now passing on the wisdom that God's imparted to him to his nation of young people, but also to the young nation of young parents. And that's why I love this passage. If you want to read the passage with me as well, it's Proverbs 23, verses 24. And simple verse is this: a father of a righteous man has great joy. He who has a wise son delights in him. Our kids can bring us joy and delight. Hopefully you as a dad find joy and delight in being a dad. I know there's moments that are tough, moments that are difficult, but hopefully your calling as a dad in the life of your children gives you absolute joy. Not just happiness, but joy, but also delight. This idea of overwhelming happiness, overwhelming joy, understanding that God's light is in your life. And that's what I want you to think about today as we get into Father's Day in a few weeks, is what brings us delight, what brings us joy, but how do we get to that point? Let's be real, there's moments as dads that we don't feel a whole lot of joy in what we're doing. We maybe don't feel a delight in being a dad, or even delighted in our kids and how they act, what they're doing. But Proverbs gives us some instructions. Where does this joy and delight come from? It says this: the father of a righteous man, young woman comes and brings great joy. The first thing that brings joy for us as a father is righteousness. Raising up kids who are righteous. We will find and see and understand and experience joy as dads when we're willing to live right in front of our kids, but also raise our kids to live right with God and others. That's what righteousness is this idea of living right before God, right with God, right according to God, and then living right with others. That's a hard thing for us to do, isn't it, sometimes? But what we need to do as fathers is we need to step up our responsibility, our calling, to be the men of God who are the men who stand up for what is right in this world. And it's a kind of a moving target for us right now over the last year or two. There's a lot of things happening in our world. But what we need to do, like I talked about a few weeks ago on Sunday morning during a sermon, we need to return to God's Word and find out what God's Word says is right, and then teach our children how to live according to those standards, as well as setting the example by living by those standards as well. What does it look like for us to be righteous dads in front of our kids? What that means is that we live life differently when it comes to our job. Maybe our kids aren't at the job with us, but we go home and we talk about the things, the choices we made that day to live right with God and right with others, even in circumstances that are sometimes not the easiest. Some of the things that I've gone through in my life, I've been very, very appropriate, but I've shared with my kids Times that I've been tempted to do something that wasn't right, or put in a situation that wasn't right, or put in a situation with an employee or a coworker or a boss. Those are the moments of discipleship. Those are the moments when we can talk to our kids and say, hey, I didn't do this right, but here's what I wanted to do, or here's what I did to make that right choice according to God's word, and I lived right in front of others. It can play out on the sports field. It can play out when we're out in our neighborhood with our other families. It can play out as we interact with each other in our home. What does it look like for our kids and for us to be righteous? Righteousness is a very easy word to look up in the Bible because it's full all over the Bible for us to look that up. My challenge for you, first one, is to go Google or look at a commentary and look up some of the words righteousness all over the Bible. What does God's word say about how to live right? Simple instructions for being a dad. And what's going to happen is if we live right, we raise kids who are right, we raise kids who are righteous, we are not going to just be happy, we are going to have an experience of joy. The second thing this verse says is about delight. What does it look like to have just absolute enjoyment in being a dad? It comes down to a very simple thing: raising up wise sons and daughters. It's the idea of wisdom, right? We talk a lot about fatherly wisdom, but what does it look like for us as dads to impart God's wisdom to them? See, there's a difference between wisdom and knowledge. One of our responsibilities as a dad is to impart knowledge, teaching our kids how to change a tire, teaching our kids how to do things around the house, whether our son or our daughter, having those moments of giving them facts and knowledge and understanding of the world, making them ready to go out in life. But the other responsibility as godly men, as godly fathers, is to give them not just knowledge, but wisdom. See, wisdom is the application of knowing something. God's word, we know God's word, and then we live God's word, and we show how to be wise. It's kind of the simple idea of a fork and an outlet. We know what happens when a fork and an outlet get together. The wisdom is not putting the fork in the outlet. That's how we teach our kids. We teach our kids about electricity. We teach our kids about being safe. We teach our kids about not putting the fork into the outlet. Wisdom is teaching them to not do it and making sure they don't do it. There's moments in our lives when our kids want to do something that we know doesn't make sense, and it definitely is not wise. And the thing is, sometimes it's hard for us not to be their buddy, their friend, but to be their dad. But that's what God has called us to do. Is not just to give them knowledge, but to show them about right living and wisdom. How do we live with wisdom? Is we show our kids how to be wise by applying God's word, but applying the things that they know and understand. And there's moments of life, those are the hardest times. Those are the times when we aren't popular, when you have to do the hard things of being a dad. And that is saying, you know what? I know what is right. I know what's going to happen, and I want you to be wise, and I want to share some of my wisdom with you. I know what happened when I put a fork in an outlet when I was little. I don't want you to go through the same experience. But so often as dads, we'd rather just kind of take the easy road and say, well, you experienced that. I don't want to be the bad guy. And what happens is we see over and over again is kids who make unwise choices, make disastrous decisions in their lives, and we step back and watch them do it. What our job is as dads is to step between them in those bad choices and say, no, we're not going to let you make that unwise choice. I love you too much, and I love my responsibility and my calling from God too much to let you ruin your life or ruin this opportunity. So what I want you to do is I want you to go back to Proverbs and look. Right? We want to enjoy being a dad, and that comes from righteousness. We want to have a delight in being a dad this Father's Day. That comes from us being wise, but also teaching our kids to be wise. We have the opportunity to enjoy being a dad. Living godly fatherhood, living biblical fatherhood is not a hard thing. It's a simple thing if we simply follow God's instructions. What we do is we make it harder when we try to do it our own way. Hopefully what I want you to do today is I just want to give you the challenge, but also with some encouragement. You can do this. I know you can. And you know what? I am here for you, and the rest of our staff fathers are here for you to help you when it comes to right living and to wisdom. Thank you so much for tuning in this month. We will have a brand new one for July coming up. My wife and I will be back together in our family room talking to you about some great ways to be a family together and also how to live life differently on mission together for God. Have a great Father's Day. We will see you in person here on Sunday.